Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and I am so excited about today's episode because our guest today is an exemplary positive leader. He's very humble. He might not say that about himself, but I'm going to say it for him. In fact, so much so that I have cited him and his proven positive practices in other episodes on this podcast. His name is Doug Conant, and he is the only former Fortune 500 CEO who is a New York Times bestselling author, a top 50 leadership innovator, a top 100 leadership speaker, and one of the 100 most influential authors in the world. He is the founder and CEO of Conant Leadership, former president and CEO of Campbell's Soup Company, former president of Nabisco Foods, and former chairman of Avon Products. He has also served on multiple corporate boards, including AmerisourceBergen and RHR International. He began his career in marketing at General Mills and held leadership positions in marketing and strategy at Kraft. Right now, he has a brand new book out. It is a Wall Street Journal bestseller, co-authored with Amy Fetterman, and it's called The Blueprint: 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership to New Heights. And it is a seminal treatise on leadership and also a practical guide for leading effectively in a chaotic world. So it is an absolute privilege to have Doug on the show. We're going to hear more about his philosophy on leadership and, of course, the new book. So without further ado, welcome, Doug. It is so wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I'd love to take you on the road with me. You do that very well. So thank you. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be connecting with you and your audience.
Thank you, Doug. And it's very easy to do because, boy, do you have, an impressive resume, an impressive bio. And I really, truly am honored to have you on the show. So, one of the questions that I always ask all of our guests, because, of course, this is the positive leadership movement, is what does positive leadership mean to you? So I'm really curious, Doug, what is your personal definition, or how do you look at positive leadership?
Here, I'm going to start with my definition of leadership, and then we'll talk about positive leadership.
Yep.
I pondered this a long time, and what I've ended up with is, for me, the definition of leadership is the art and the science of influencing others in a specific direction. The art and the science of influencing others in a specific direction. The art is more what we might think of as the EQ, and the science is more the IQ of that equation.
Yep.
So the EQ and the IQ influencing others in a specific direction. So then I attach the concept of, well, what's positive? What do you mean by positive? And I think it would be the art and the science of influencing others in a specific direction and delivering a positive outcome. And then you might ask, well, what do you mean by a positive outcome? And I think that's what I would call the what and the how. What direction were you heading in, and did you get there?
Mm-hmm.
Is part of the outcome, but not all of it. The other part of the outcome is, how did you do it? Did you do it in a way that honored the people with whom you were traveling? If you got to your desired destination and you did it in an honorable way that arguably would be more enduring, I'd say that's positive leadership. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's influencing others, honoring people, and getting to your desired results. So that's my definition of positive leadership. And that's it.
Yeah. And I love that. I love how you broke that down as well. and that you talked about it being an art and a science, because I think, leadership as a general topic, I mean, it just covers so many different facets, right? And sometimes we get sort of plugged into this, okay, here's the formula. No, it's not a formula. You need to have sort of these traits, or you need to be born with this, quality or something like that. But actually, as you noted, it really is an art and a science. It's kind of like this balancing act, or maybe a juggling act is a better way to say it. And I know that, I mean, you have been a devoted leadership practitioner and teacher for decades. And you describe your approach as achieving high performance through an intentional commitment to studying and practicing and improving and spreading these tenets of leadership that work. So tell us more about that. Like, what does that look like for you? How do you continue to study and practice and improve?
Well, Alex, I view leadership this way. Leadership of people. We could be talking about thought leadership too, but right now I'm talking about someone leading a team in a nonprofit, a for-profit, a civic organization, a school, doesn't matter. If you're leading a team, to me, you have to treat that as sacred ground. And I mean that. You have a profound influence on the people who are working for and with you. If you are the leader, those people are probably thinking more about what they're doing for and with you than they are taking care of their own family and getting the dog out for a walk. They're waking up thinking about, what do I need to do? They're doing it all day. They get home, have a little time with the family, and then they get on emails again. And then maybe they can squeeze in an hour of watching TV before they fall asleep with their spouse. I believe that's sacred ground. And sadly, I think most leaders lead by the seat of their pants. And that's just not good enough. You owe it to the people that are working for and with you to be better than that. If I think about anything that I've ever aspired to be good at, you know what? I've had to be intentional. I've had to work at it. I don't know, you've done over 60 podcasts, right? Or something like that. You probably have had to work at it. You probably weren't as good at the first one as you are at the 60th. And you probably studied the people who are good at it. You figured out what works and what's not. And you're very intentional with how you run your podcast. I think a leader has to be pretty damn intentional about how they lead others and how they honor the concept of the fact that they're on sacred ground with those people. It's just not good enough to be doing this by the seat of your pants. And I know leadership can become a daunting thing. You feel like, I've got to go to Harvard and get my MBA, and then maybe I'll be scratching the surface, or I've got to do like Doug Conant, and I've got to be a student of it for 40 years, and then maybe I'll get better. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's really the reason we wrote the blueprint, because we had to make this concept approachable. And that's the important thing with leadership. You do need to be intentional. Anything, I wanted to be a very good tennis player. Fortunately, I became good enough to pay for my college and my graduate school and to develop some skills. But I had to work at it. I had to go practice it. I had to study it. I had to reflect on, how did I want to show up on the court? And I think that's true of anyone who aspires to be an effective leader. I think you have to work at it. You have to reflect, study a little bit. Of course, you can't do everything. It has to fit in the middle of your cockamamie day, because we all have cockamamie days. And so it's complicated. And what we were trying to do, and we have done, I believe, with the blueprint, is create an approachable path to people being able to lift themselves up and honor the people that work for and with them, and be a little more intentional.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, you feel like, yeah, I really ought to do that. I just got to find a way to do it wisely, given that I've got family, demands on my time, work is, crazy. One more thing, and I'll give it back to you. But one of my mentors was a fellow by the name of Warren Bennis, who passed away a few years ago. And but my first book, it was part of his series of books. And Warren, in 1987, created the concept with a partner, a writing partner at the time, of a VUCA world. VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That was in 1987. Fast forward to today. Today is a VUCA world on steroids.
Yes.
All right. So when you're talking leadership with people who are in the middle of the vortex of a VUCA world on steroids, your conversation is going to fall on deaf ears unless you make it approachable and bite-sized enough so that they can get engaged and make a little progress. And that's what we tried to do with this book. It's not easy, but it is approachable.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
It's a wonderful story. And I appreciate you saying that we have to be intentional and practice, because I think you're right. When you talk about tennis, or we talk about, some things in life in terms of, what we do, whether it's, whether it's becoming good at podcasts or research or playing tennis, we know we have to practice, but somehow leadership almost becomes, I think for some people, it's like, oh yeah, I got made a leader. Awesome. I'm here. And then that's it. There's nothing further that goes into that. And I think it wraps back around to what you said at the beginning in terms of your definition of positive leadership. It's like, how did you get where you were going? And did you do it in a way that lifted people up and honored them? And, to your point, if you are a leader, it is about, I love that you call it a sacred ground that you have in terms of the people that you are leading and that you've been trusted with, because they all have lives. And as you said, they're pretty much spending most of their waking hours wondering, how can I do what I need to do for my boss, my leader?
Yeah.
And honoring that and bringing people along. It's wonderful. I love how you describe that.
Well, that's the spirit of this. And if you want the responsibility of leadership, you sort of have to take the responsibility of getting better at it. And by the way, if you don't, you're at risk on the other side of the equation. So, this leadership thing is a very Darwinian thing. You grow or you die. And if you aspire to be a leader and you're not getting the most out of your team, how long do you think you're going to have that team? Or how long you think you're going to have that job?
Exactly.
This is important, not just because it's the right thing to do, in my opinion, and the honorable thing to do. It also is, I would argue, the only thing to do if you want to continue to have the opportunity to lead people.
Right.
Look, in the corporate world, I'm going to be real simplify here. You got 3 years. You take over a new job because somebody was inadequate leading or left. Okay, you take over the job. The first year, it's the other guy's fault. The second year, it's our fault, we're learning. The third year, I own it, right?
Yeah.
And you better be performing. Now, there may be different time frames, but you get the idea. And so by the time you're going to be owning it, which is a year or two in with the job, you better have a team that's bought in, drank the Kool-Aid, and is fully engaged in the work and is going to help you take the mountain. Otherwise, you're at risk. So it's the right thing to do, not only for the team, but also for you to perpetuate your career in a way that can be most effective and most fulfilling.
Yeah. And I know, you have intimate experience with this. If we talk just for a moment about your time at Campbell Soup, because I think that's such a phenomenal positive leadership story. That's the one I've actually cited in other podcast episodes. As I understand it, when you came in as the CEO of Campbell Soup in 2001, you had a situation where the market share was cut in half, people were being laid off, sales, of course, were declining given the other factors. And in just 5 years, you turned those numbers around. And within 9 years, you were achieving all-time performance records and getting awards for best place to work. And I believe, and I want you to talk about this and share, of course, your own story, but I believe you did it by, walking your talk that you've said on this show, which is telling people we're going to meet high standards, but we're going to do it in a civil way. We're going to be tough-minded, but we're going to be tender-hearted. We're going to have touch points with people. We're going to make them feel valued. I believe you even hand wrote over 30,000 thank you notes to employees.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean,
there are
tell
a
us
lot of
about that
stories.
experience.
But I would say, and I'll talk about Campbell, I would tell you the more challenging time was, which is not as well known, was my decade at Nabisco when we were part of the world's largest LBO. We were owned by private equity for a decade, and we had to turn that around in order to, which is what ultimately gave me the Campbell job. And that I wasn't the CEO there; I was just one of the people trying to get the thing going, and that was daunting. Campbell was also daunting and very challenging. I did take it over at a period where it was really at a all-time low, and success arguably is a low base. So I got there when things were not good, but the prospects for them getting better were not good either. We had lost a lot of market value, half our market value. We had been through a series of layoffs. Everything throughout the business system had been compromised because we were trying to deliver quarterly results that were unsustainable. So by the time you got to the next year, there was just nowhere to go, and the bottom had started to fall out. We started making not just bad decisions, but worse decisions. And then we were being investigated by all the regulatory bodies on the decisions we'd made. And employees were highly alienated. So I went in, and I believe when you go into any situation, the important thing as a leader to do is to declare yourself and say, as a leader, you want to take the mystery out of your relationship with the people you work with. You want to get it out of the way as quickly as you can. Any leader I ever worked with, or maybe you worked with when you were doing all your statistical work, I could spend a month or two trying to figure out what in the world did they really want me to do? Where were they coming from? How am I going to make this work? How can I plug in? Well, I've gotten to a point where I just tell you the first day, here's where I am. Here's where I'm coming from. Here's how I'm going to behave. I did that the first day at Campbell's. I said, we can't ask you to value our agenda until we tangibly demonstrate that we value your agenda, that we care about you. I believe as we demonstrate that in a meaningful way, you will begin to increasingly care about what we're trying to do. And I also said, I know we can't talk our way out of something we behaved our way into. We behaved our way into a mess. It's going to take us a long time to get out of it. Yep. I gave us 3 years to go from being the most uncompetitive food company in the world to being a very competitive food company. And I said, it's going to be a long journey. We're in this together. If you'll lean in, we will lean in, and we'll demonstrate our commitment to you. We did that, and we had the worst employee engagement in the Fortune 500 when we started. Wow. You know, numbers. We did it with the Gallup Q12 survey.
Yep.
And we went from the worst to the very best in the Fortune 500 over a decade. But we had to make tough calls. I ultimately, in the first 3 years, we told the leaders, I talked earlier about the what and the how. When you think about positive leadership, it's not just what you want to accomplish, but how you're going to do it in a way that involves others and is fulfilling for them too. So we pursued the what and the how. We said, our leaders, we have to make progress, but we have to do it in a way that honors everyone in the institution. And if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't be working here. Right. But we'll work with you. After 3 years, we had turned over 300 of the top 350 leaders in the company.
Wow.
Which is the most I've ever heard of in a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, that's a lot.
We promoted 150 from within, but we had to go outside and hire 150 from all over the place and create a whole new culture while we were fixing the company. But we did. Along the way, we had to be reaffirming of everyone else, because I had 25,000 employees, and the top 350 were important, but there were 22,000 more we had to pay attention to. Yep. And as part of that, I did things like write those thank you notes. I wrote 10 to 20 notes a day. I have found that all companies tend to be great critical thinking machines. We are built to find what's wrong and fix it. Even in the most broken companies, I have seen 8 out of 10 things are being done right, but we don't talk about those. We just find the things that are done wrong. So I started celebrating in handwritten notes 10 to 20 a day, 6 days a week for 10 years, things that were being done right. We'd pull the stuff off the portal one night. I'd be driving home. I'd read it all on the way in the morning. I was being driven in. I would write 10 to 20 notes, congratulating people on delivering a new product on time, or getting the line up and running, or meeting their sales quota, or whatever it was. They were notes celebrating contributions of significance in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And when I retired, Fortune was interviewing me, and they said, well, how many of these notes have you written? And I said, I have no idea. I just write 10 to 20 a day. And we sat there and said, let's do the math.
Yeah.
So we did the math, and it turned out to just Campbell employees, I'd written over 30,000 notes, and we had less than 25,000 people. Wherever you went in the world, we had operations in 38 countries. We were marketed in 125 countries, and we were much more than a soup company. Wherever you went, you would see one of my handwritten notes pinned up in their cubicle, anywhere in the world, or an accounting center, or in a factory. It was the darndest thing, but it was my way of saying, look, we're paying it. Oh, and they got those notes within a week from when I heard about the activity. It wasn't like 3 months later. And if it was in Australia and it was a big deal, they would get the notes sent Federal Express to their home, where they would open it with their family. Their family would say, what's that? And they'd see, wow, this is from the CEO. And they'd get a handwritten note from me thanking them for whatever they did.
Talk about making people feel valued, Doug. I mean,
right.
That's it right there.
That's it. And it didn't cost a penny.
Right.
You know, people, I get in this, you know, we talk about positive leadership. This doesn't cost a penny. People worry, well, you're asking me to spend all this money and we're going to create all these incentive programs. No. Personal attention, the care and feeding of an organization is job one for a leader.
Yeah.
And if you want them to show up for you, you just have to show up for them.
Yeah.
So that's the story about the notes and the spirit of positivity that I think you have to bring, because the world is being negative.
Right.
Your customers are saying you're not doing enough. Your shareholders are saying you're not doing enough. The managers are saying, yeah, this is the busted number in your spreadsheet. Why is that broke? It's a negative world. Yeah. And you have to bring balance to it. And by the way, you got to address the negatives too. But when you've set the table and you've built an emotional bank account with the organization that is anchored in a full view of how things are being done, they can accept it when you give them critical feedback.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just a squeaky wheel.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, you know, being a positive leader isn't about ignoring the negatives. Of course not. Right. It's like you still have to deal with those, but it's, again, comes back to how do you do it? And are you balancing with the positive? And I love that, you know, you essentially turned the culture around, and in the process brought everything with it. So I just, the story is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that.
The culture, you know, my words, I always say this, if you can't win in the marketplace unless you first win in the workplace.
Yes.
And you create a positive culture and you get positive results. You create a negative culture and you're at risk. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us more about the new book. I know you were saying how the reason that you decided to put it together is to essentially kind of simplify, you know, what do people need to do? And I love that you have, you know, these 6 practical steps in here. So tell us about the core proposition of the blueprint, this new book, and, you know, a little bit more about why you decided to put it together.
You know, I'll use the corporate kind of approach in a way. You know, we have a plan for everything. Every company has a strategic plan, a business plan, a quarterly plan, a plan for operations, a plan for sales, an earnings plan, a market share plan, a survey plan. You know, they have a plan for implementing a survey. They have plans we have plans for everything. I'll talk to an executive. What's your leadership? What's your plan for your own leadership?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
And then it leads to this conversation of, well, you need to be a little intentional. don't
Yep.
you? Yeah. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I have a plan for everything else. If I want to be a good leader, I probably should have a plan. Uh, okay, I get that. And the only plan they have is the plan the organization has told them. These are the things we want you to do: deliver results, show good, manage your time well, whatever the attributes are. But they haven't thought, most leaders haven't thought about, how do I want to show up?
Right.
You know, Brene Brown, every year I pick a quote of the year, and Brene Brown was my quote in 2020.
Mhm.
And the quote I picked of hers was, "You can either walk inside your story and own it, or you can stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness." And
Mm,
and
that's
most
powerful.
leaders are not walking inside of their story. They're walking inside the story their boss has of them, and before they went to work, inside the story their teachers or their parents had of them. They're
Mhm.
not in their story. They haven't even thought about their story.
Mhm.
And what we do with this book is we help them get into their story. How do you want to show up? What's important to you? Not what's important to the company. We're going to get to that. And this book is about helping every individual leader find their way. And the language I use is the only way out of this, of getting unstuck, the only way to get unstuck as a leader, the only way out is by going in
Mhm.
and by really reflecting on your life and what you've learned from it and how you want to show up, studying the world around you smartly, not going crazy with it, people you admire, and then build a plan, a simple plan. Don't make it too, if it's hard to do, it's too complicated. Don't do it.
Mhm.
And then develop a couple practices that help you bring that plan to life. We'll take the thank you note story as an example. Okay, I've reflected and I see an opportunity for me to be a more positive leader, let's say. And I study the world around me. Who are the people that I've looked at around the world and in my own life who are positive? Did they have any habits or practices that would be good?
Mhm.
My mother wanted me to write thank you notes for Christmas presents, and I never did. But as I got into it, I started realizing, there's an opportunity here for me to celebrate people who are making contributions of significance.
Mhm.
So I want to be a positive leader. And one of the practices, I'm going to write 10 to 20 notes a day. And and it happened to fit into my cockamamie life because I was stuck in a car going to work for 2.5 hours every day,
Right.
long, but it fit in my life.
Mhm.
And we make it virtually that simple to reflect on first point is, what kind of leader do you want to be? Whatever you say the first time you go through will be wrong, but it'll be 80% right. It'll be a starting point. Then reflect on your life and what have you learned from it? Study the world around you, make a plan, keep it really simple, develop a couple practices, and then say, well, how did that go? And how can I do better tomorrow? That's the book. And anybody can do it as long as they don't. The language we use in there is say, forget perfection. Forget it.
Mhm.
It's elusive. It'll never happen. I've been working on this forever. And I'm just getting warmed up in terms of developing the suite of leadership skills I really aspire to have.
Yeah.
So, just the goal is, I was doing an interview yesterday with the American Writers Museum in Chicago, and the interviewer I talk about continuous improvement. I liked the way the interviewer talked about it. He talked about progressive improvement,
Mm.
and just thinking about, how can I do a little better tomorrow than I did today in a way that works. You know,
Right.
I've worked my whole life. I don't have time to go study this stuff until the cows come home. I've got a family to take care of. I've got bills to pay. I have work to do. Uh, and it's got to fit in my life. Sadly, most of the people that have written on this subject haven't done it. And they have great perspective and they add a lot of value, but they haven't been in the thick of thin things. They
Yeah.
haven't walked a mile in someone's shoes. I've walked 1,000 miles in those shoes,
Mhm.
and I've been a student of it. And so, what we try and bring to this is this degree of pragmatism, real world stuff that is missing from most of the books.
Yeah.
Last point. And that's all good. And then you develop a plan for yourself. That's not good enough, because then you got to go to the real world again. You got to go back to work
That's right.
at wherever you're doing your survey work. Okay.
Mhm.
You got to show up, and you got to do with a real boss with real objectives. So in the book, we help you say, okay, I've developed my plan. Okay. It's pretty good. It's approachable. I can do it. Now, what's your reentry plan at work? How can you bring that to life when you walk into work? And we take them through an exercise where they say, here are the values I have with my plan. Here are the values the company has. It's like the old Venn diagrams we had in
Yep.
school.
Mhm.
Where is their commonality? Where's their overlap? Typically, every organization wants at least two things. They want performance, and they want they want to have people that help develop the people and the organization. So performance and people are it. And usually people can find a way to be more the way they want to be in any culture. Uh, and then they get their reentry plan, and then they start to stand out and make a difference, and do it in a fulfilling way.
Mm.
That's you almost don't need to buy the book now. I've given you all the
I
highlights.
gave it all away. But yeah, no, the book is terrific. It really is worth picking up. I have to say, I got it on Amazon. I'm sure it's available in all other places too. But I really do love that you focus on the simplicity in this. Like two things that really stuck out to me, and I'm still working my way through it. I'll be honest about that. But where I have gotten to, I mean, you mentioned this just now, this whole idea of your life story is your leadership story. I mean, that
Yeah.
really resonated with me, because I think so many of us, we try to separate our work self, the person who shows up at work every day,
Yeah.
from our personal selves. And I mean, you mentioned Brene Brown, of course, she specializes in this, right? I mean, if you try to separate those two things, you are not going to be in a good place.
Well, yeah.
And so I love that you focus on that. And I love that you also, say, hey, just pick a couple of practices, just go do them, pick something that works for you, that fits into your life. Maybe thank you notes isn't your thing. Maybe you think about writing thank you notes and you just, you don't like that. Okay, find something else, find something simple. But that's all it needs to be to get the wheels in motion, to start to kind of move the plan forward. And then, of course, as you said, you're going to hone it, and you're going to improve it, and you're going to refine it over time. Especially as you re-enter the workforce, right? It reminds me of that old, I don't know if it was Mike Tyson said it, everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face, right?
Yeah, well, and you're going to get hit in the face. So your plan ought to contemplate that. It's going to happen. Look, I had 28 bosses in my career, and 3 of them were good. You get hit in the face all the time.
Yeah.
Again, you got to be pragmatic. That's going to happen. Okay, when I get hit in the face, what can I be doing that is still keeping me on my path?
Yep.
And I guarantee there are things you can be doing. I did it for a decade in KKR land, which was in many ways even more challenging than doing it at Campbell Soup Company. So it can be done.
Yeah. And one other thing that I noticed in here, you talk about your work in this area in leadership, about making meaning, not money.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute, because I think, especially in the corporate world, right? If we have the leadership function, as you said, where that Venn diagram overlaps of, what are my values? What are the company's values? Guess what? Performance, i.e. making money, right, is very often, one of the items that's going to be in the sweet spot of the Venn diagram. And as leaders, I mean, very often that's sort of what we're charged to do, is like, look, get top performance on your team, make the money, especially, and you were publicly traded companies forced to make these quarterly decisions all about making money. So tell us about this. It's a little counterintuitive, and I sort of want to understand it and have you unpack it a little bit.
Well, it's not either or, it's both. You have to, if you want the job, you have to perform, and you're competing with companies that are growing. And so you have to grow, but not at the expense of the soul of the enterprise. All the employee engagement work that's been done, and you must have been exposed to this when you were doing the survey work, It drives,
course.
we can keep it real simple again because I'm simple-minded, but it drives off Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, Stephen Covey made that simple for me by saying, Doug, it's all about the 4 L's. Living at the base of the pyramid, loving, learning, and leaving a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And living is you got to be paid well to do your job. You're a family steward. You have to take care of your family, and so that's important. But all the information I've seen on this is it's even more important that you're valued at work, that you're loved, that somebody cares about you in your work as you're slogging through this. It's also mission critical that you have opportunities to learn and grow. And ultimately, people want to be, if they're laboring, we talked earlier about sacred ground, more of this, your time being devoted to this than anything else.
Yeah.
You don't want to say, I'm doing all this for a paycheck.
Right.
No, there's a higher calling here. There's a sense of purpose I have. Everywhere I've been, I have wanted to elevate that conversation to, I want to leave a legacy of contribution that transcends the ordinary. When
Mm-hmm.
I start talking about fair compensation, having people feel valued, giving them opportunities to learn and grow, and making the work special in some way, then we have a formula for success and a formula for positive leadership. It's not just about money, but money counts. And and quite frankly, it takes money to make money. So you've got to create a formula that delivers the earnings, but not at the expense of the soul of the organization or some of the stakeholders of the organization. It's about all the stakeholders and lifting everyone up in a wise way that, in my opinion, is all about a higher calling, a higher purpose.
Yeah, I love that. It's like money is sort of the ballpark entry place, but everything else is the value add. And when you add the value add, then actually ultimately you will create more money, but you're going to do it in a way that is allowing people to feel valued, to leave a legacy, to be learning, and to have that, self-actualization, right? If we go back to Maslow, have that kind of experience in the workplace and not feel like, oh, I'm slogging it out for this paycheck,
I can't imagine going to work like that. I can't. And we can do better, and you can do better, and who's ever listening can do better. You can find a place where you can be contributing to some higher calling in some meaningful way and still make a living. And that ought to be the goal, not just getting a paycheck.
Oh, amen. Powerful, powerful thought. So I would love to keep talking to you. I could talk to you all day, Doug, but I got to be mindful of the time.
Sure.
And I think that is a beautiful place to kind of put a bow on things. So, I mean, we barely scratched the surface here, though. So I do encourage all our listeners to go get this book, The Blueprint by Doug Conant. It is a great read. And like he just said, he really breaks it down, makes it practical. This is not like you don't have to study for a PhD. It's demystified. It gives you the steps. It's easily digestible. Go pick up a copy. And I know, Doug, people are gonna get more of you. So how can they get in touch with you? I think you're pretty active on social media. Can people connect with you that way?
Yeah, we've got a conversation going with 400,000 people every day about leadership between Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And we invite everyone to come in, people who want to be part of it. Also, they can reach us at Conant Leadership. I do a couple of fun things. I run a boot camp, and I can take you through the book in 2 days, and you can be done. And it's a boot camp. There's some work to do, but I'm actually running one next week. I do 4 a year. And I also do a coaching series where I actually take 4 hours during a month, one night a week for an hour and 15 minutes, and we go through the book together. And it's a delightful time. And so we have those kind of things available. If you go to the conantleadership.com website, you'll see that. I guess the last thing is I don't get paid. We charge for some of these events, but I take no salary. And what we charge for is to cover our costs. And historically, until last year, we more than covered our costs, and we give all the money away to other organizations that are trying to move the world forward. So we really, we walk the talk when we talk about meaning, not money. We're in this for all the right reasons, and we're excited about the potential for everyone to lift their game, and that's what it's all about for us.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love that. Yeah, go check out conantleadership.com. Sounds like there are some amazing opportunities. And as you can hear from just the brief amount that Doug has shared with us today, you can learn a lot from this amazing man. So it has been such a pleasure having you on the show, Doug. Thank you so much. I am truly honored to have you on. You are one of my positive leadership heroes, and it's been such a thrill to be able to interview. So thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode. If you have positive leadership stories to share, or you have questions about this topic, just send me a line at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. I always love to hear from you. And one of my habits is that I like to respond to all the emails that I get. So if you send me an email, it is not going into some random cyberspace black hole and you'll never hear. I will return the email and respond to you. So, all right, that is a wrap for this week's episode. This is Alex Bratty signing out and thanking you for being part of the positive leadership movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.